This is 77.7, The Bird. Yeah.
Thank you for having us, The Bird. I am here with Joey's Tours Incorporated, and we are a group that has been studying Chernobyl for a little while, and we're soon to open, and we're going to offer tours of Chernobyl that you come and participate in. We keep it safe. You're never going to get exposed to too much radiation. It's a really good experience to come and just see the beautiful landscape of Chernobyl. It's very humbling. You get to see the wildlife that's taken back the city. It's gorgeous, and everyone should get a chance to do it. But today, we're here to talk about Chernobyl a little bit and teach the listeners some of the things they need to know and some of the things they should know about Chernobyl, because it's a fascinating subject. I'm Perrin Kingaby, and then my associates will introduce themselves.
I'm Grant Sherrill.
I'm Hussein Ganai.
I'm Alex Konachek.
I'm Michael Zamora.
And we're going to start off today with this.
We're starting talking about some history, because, history is the greatest background around. So it happened on April 26, 1986, in the Soviet Union of modern-day Ukraine. It was a large-scale reactor failure that caused a 10-day fire. It's mainly caused by a lot of poor communication and incompetent security personnel. So,
the blast sent many radioactive isotopes that were used in the reactor in a 30-kilometer radius. These isotopes included cesium, iodine, strontium, and plutonium, which are all very radioactive.
Soon after, many citizens in the surrounding areas fled to Belarus to avoid the radiation. Some of the workers came down with cancer, resulting in many deaths a few months after the event. In the immediate blast zone, over 5 million people were said to be contaminated, which is pretty gnarly.
The nearby local town Pripyat, with a population of almost 50,000 people, were evacuated immediately after the blast. Some of the residents began to have headaches and metallic taste in their mouths a few hours after the explosion, and evacuation didn't seem necessary at first. On April 27, 1986, buses arrived at Pripyat, and many trains were prepared for evacuation. They were evacuated after Soviet authorities announced evacuations orders that morning.
The immediate result of this was the cancer scare, a large spread fear of the dangerous elements and what the effects are on the body. This, however, was not proven to be completely accurate, as the cancer most imagined would be localized in the lungs and brain. But in reality, the thyroid was the most commonly affected, and mainly in people who were exposed to the radiation at a young age. Many of the people who definitely died of radiation were the workers, who worked on the reactor and the cleanup afterwards. Some of the numbers for the actual numbers of death have been misrepresented over the years, as a citizen who couldn't explain natural deaths blamed it all on the radiation.
It is true that cancer rates have increased in the area of the event, but these rates have been increased or were increasing before the event as well. And there's little evidence that these increased rates are because of the radiation exposure.
So we finished our research, but before we talk about everything that we've learned, I want to go back and have a conversation about things like our initial reaction when we first heard about Chernobyl and when we first started learning about it, what we thought. And I guess I'll start. But when I first learned about Chernobyl, I was in middle school, I think, and it was for a project. But I was young, so I didn't really grasp the full concept and impact of a disaster like this. So it didn't really stand out to me that much. But now that I'm older, it sounds too horrible to be true. Like it's one of the biggest nuclear disasters that's ever happened, and I'm really glad that it's not in the United States. But it still sucks because even though it's in Russia, it affects the whole world, and it's bad for everybody.
Yeah, I think you raise a fine point there, and I gotta say, whenever I first learned about it, I first heard about it whenever Fukushima happened over in Japan, and all I ever associated with it was cancer, and cancer's bad.
Mm-hmm.
So I just heard about all these compounds being in the waterways and everyone dying of cancer, and so when I went to this project, I just thought, everyone's dying of cancer over there. There's no hope for anybody. We're all gonna die.
Yeah, but so again, I pretty much thought the same thing when we first started. When I first heard about it, it's like this horrible thing, cancer everywhere. But as we'll see with our later facts, it might not be all that bad. But yeah, when I first heard about it, I was like, what is this? This horrible. Again, I heard about it too when the Fukushima reactor melted down in Japan, and stuff about nuclear reactors was going around and cancer spreading.
See, I think my first impression was a whole lot different than everybody else's. Yeah, I did a project in middle school, and it was a pretty good project. Like, I was like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. It was just another nuclear disaster, something that happened back in the day before I was born. But, then my dad was like not even a week later, coincidentally, Chernobyl Diaries came out, That's some horror movie about Chernobyl, and there were all these, walking radiation people who would, murder everybody at night and stuff. And, being a kid, and, I was like, ah, crap, this is real. This is real. And then I thought there were actual people, and then, turns out there's not actually people there who are going to murder you. I mean, I would hope not.
I also thought Chernobyl was something that killed a lot of people, but it actually didn't kill too many people, and many of the effects, like cancer, thyroid cancer, they aren't exactly linked to Chernobyl, and all the effects were kind of there before it happened.
So much of the environment was also exposed to radiation, including the reserve. So iodine and strontium, which were two of the isotopes that were released from the explosion, were quickly absorbed by the water, but their half-life is quite short, so the amount of radiation coming from those isotopes decreased quickly. There was a lasting impact, mainly from cesium, another isotope, which has a longer half-life. But it's been long enough that even cesium has mostly decayed, and many of the bodies of water are safe, especially the ones that had rivers flowing in and out of them. There are some bodies of water which are closed and are stagnant and are still considered radioactive.
So, this also brings a lot of problems to the forests in the area. The forests, of course, have their own ecosystems in themselves, which include things like trees, grasses, mushrooms, games, and now the radiation enters into this ecosystem, and it gets strewn out throughout. So it'll enter into the ground and get absorbed by the trees and the mushrooms, of course, and get into the berries and then spread to the game and other animals that consume it. It's been here for about two decades and will continue to be a problem, unlike agricultural regions, where it's kind of decreasing a little bit more quickly. So one of the things they've noticed in these ecosystems is biomagnification.
Mm-hmm. So within the first month of the event, many animals and plants died and experienced troubles with their reproductive systems. And basically what would happen is, as my part said, this is due to biomagnification. And that process essentially is what it is if you think of a food pyramid, on the bottom are the producers that use sunlight to make their own food, so they don't consume anymore, but they're the base level, and they're already contaminated with things like the radiation. So things like that bird that you just heard would eat smaller insects, and the insects would eat the grass, and as the food chain went through, or from the bottom to the top, that the pollutants in the system would accumulate and grow in quantity because of the way the food chain would multiply them. And that was leading to some effects, and things like reindeer that would eat the plants and berries had taken some of the radiation, and then humans would eat them and experience some form of radiation poisoning. Along with the fish in the rivers, the biomagnification works its way through the ecosystem. However, because of migration and reduced radiation exposure, the radiation levels in animals and plants declined almost fully by the next growing season.
So not only was the environment affected by the Chernobyl example, but the economy was also heavily impacted. Mostly the agriculture sector in the immediate area where much of the milk was irradiated. This caused the chaos in the industry as milk from Ukraine was all over Europe and had to be recalled and tested. The agricultural downturn was followed closely by the housing and infrastructure of the land. Fun fact of the day: Ukraine devoted up to 22% of its national budget to disaster, which was pretty huge for their economy. Because
Recently, the plan to erase this problem was to cover it in a large dome, cutting it off from the outside world. It is projected at 160 meters long by 108 meters high. Completed by 2017, the total cost of this megastructure is $1.5 billion. The design should last up to 100 years and slowly allow the surrounding area to recover and flourish.
Which is really such a shame because so many people left the area itself. It said 330,000 people left the site, and 116 of those left immediately after the explosion. And not a lot of people tried to move back either. There's a large stigma around the area itself, and so many people were traumatized from the event that they just didn't want to go back. Interestingly enough, though, the people who stayed close to the area or in the area itself were less afraid, or many people were traumatized by the actual disaster than people who had moved away and heard about it from other countries.
Yes, so that's all we have for the listeners today on Chernobyl. We're so glad that you guys stopped by and stuck with us through this.
I'm Alex Walshak.
And we're out.
This is 77.7, The Bird.